Hi folks, this is Krista Soria. I'm just going to briefly walk you through some of the major elements and components of the final paper for our data-driven decision-making class this semester. So first, one thing that I'm asking you to do is to utilize APA documentation style. APA is the documentation style for higher education, which is why I'm asking that you use it. There's a couple of great resources out there for you, one of which is the online writing lab at Purdue. And there's also great resources at Southern New Hampshire University as well. This is a great example right in front of you of an APA formatted cover page. And what you'll see is at the very top, there's this little statement, running head. You'll see that the H is lowercase with a colon. And then there's sort of a piece of the title at the top that's written all in caps. Your running head on your first page is different than the rest of your headers. So when you double click in your header, and this is at least using the new version of Word, you'll click up here at the top under Design. You're going to choose a different first page, which will let you have the running head for your first page, and then every subsequent page will have, and because you'll type it in this way, it'll have just the little abbreviated title at the top. You'll center and you won't bold your title, your name, and then Southern New Hampshire University. So that's kind of how that cover page looks. Beginning on page 1, you'll see we're going to start with the executive summary, and any first level heading is centered and bolded with capitals for each of the letters of each word. The second level heading is bolded, but it's left justified. And again, they're all capitalized. So for example, Finchley College's mission statement here, as you can see, is all capitalized. The third level heading is a little tricky, and technically, and this example here is sort of incorrect and correct at the same time, so let me explain that. Technically, for your third level heading, all of the words here would be typed in lowercase, almost like they're written like a sentence. And along those lines, you would also have a period, and then you'll see that the text abuts right up against the actual header and then your paragraph. Because these are titles, like formal job titles, the Director of Alumni Affairs, for example, it makes sense to me that the author of this paper chose to capitalize those, but typically you wouldn't do that. So let's say that instead of Data Manager, I had a section of the paper, my third level heading titled Data Management Systems, something like that, right? Or Data Management Theories, right? Which might even be better. And that, let's say that that wasn't a job title. This is technically how you would write a third level heading. Many of you might have third level headings, for example, under your recommendation section. So you might have recommendations as your first level heading. You might have a second level heading of short-term recommendations and then another one of long-term recommendations. And under those, you might have 3 or 4 different recommendations. So be sure to sort of include all of those elements in, and those third level headings can be quite useful. It's really important as you're paying attention to the rubric, and I have I put a copy of the rubric. Oh, I thought I had it handy and downloaded, but I think I need to find it. Here we go. As you pay attention to the rubric, what I'm really looking for is a couple of things. One, I'm looking for you to integrate in some secondary resources. We've read lots of great articles and texts, and we've utilized great websites all semester long. So I would love for you to integrate those into your writing. And that's one thing I think that the author of this particular paper did not do as effectively, is to integrate some of those secondary resources. It wasn't terrible. In fact, it was okay. But I think in general that your use of secondary resources is going to be really helpful. The other thing this author did not do very well is incorporating figures. Technically, per APA documentation style, what you would do is not have a floating figure, right, like you see over here. What you would do instead is you would write figure, and I'm not going to bold those. It was just the automatic setting. Figure 1, title of your graphic, whatever you want to call it. Technically, it should look just like this. So figure 1 in italics, and then the title of your graphic written like a sentence, just to give you a better feel for what that should look like. So this is how your figures technically should be titled via APA documentation style. As I mentioned before, OWL is a really great resource and I recommend utilizing it. If you go to OWL, Purdue, and you type in APA, and let's say you also wanted to type in figures, like how to, cite those figures in APA, they've got some really great examples. You have to scroll all the way down. It's a little goofy, but the caption is here, as you can see on the primary page, just sort of like I wrote it, right? Like a sentence, figure 1 is italicized. That's technically how you would go about writing that. So just a couple of things that I wanted to share. That this paper I think was not as strong on, that I think you all have the opportunity to sort of emphasize or fix for your own papers. Sorry. I would also recommend, taking a look again at the rubric, follow it closely, ensure that you are, taking all of the steps that you see here. If we scroll down to the final project rubric specifically, what I'm really going to be looking for are that you're meeting a lot of these requirements. So as you're discussing the employee roles, for example, every role should be discussed, and you should provide, maybe some insights into how that employee benefits the organization as one example. One thing that I noticed was really missing from a lot of my students when I taught this class last semester was the value section. So, what's the value of the evaluation? What's the point? What's the purpose, right? And how does it connect to the institutional mission, right? So I think, overall, if we were to sort of generalize, we could sort of say, we could make a claim like, by conducting this evaluation, we can learn about some factors that might enhance alumni giving, which might contribute to sort of the larger availability of increase in class sizes maybe, or hiring new faculty, or expanding our programs, or developing beautiful partnerships between alumni and current students, expanding mentorship programs. I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful things that can happen when institutions have more money, right? When they get more donations from their alumni, right? All sorts of beautiful things can happen. And there's a lot that you could say about that, I think. So, what's the value, right? Don't be afraid to sort of expand that. When it comes to regulatory standards, a couple of things apply, some of which we've looked at the course of this semester, but things like, we still need to sort of comply with, federal regulations. We need to ensure that we're not engaging in any sort of illegal activities. But you have read some, really good examples, and some of those are listed here in the example that I've shared with you as well, of some other like best practices or really good frameworks for understanding evaluation that I think that you could utilize in your work, to really benefit your overall final paper. Going back to our rubric, a couple of additional things that I wanted to point out is, really going back to Module 5, in which we talked about collecting new sources of data and adding those in. As you're thinking about the data that you collected, and I've acknowledged to you all that one challenge of this course is I don't think that they offer enough data, but you've got a couple of data sources. One is you have that table of data that's available to you that was given to you by the Office of Alumni Affairs. You've also got these interviews. And then finally, if you wanted to utilize your own data set just because you want to explore and have some fun creating graphics and, do lots of fun creative things, you're welcome to do that. And just sort of take a moment, though, to explain where you got these data. So again, the data were collected through interviews, the data were provided by the office, and then you may want to, take some time to talk about potential data collection in terms of your recommendations as well, right? So as you're thinking about recommendations, we've got all these different sections of, some indicators, right? And we're looking for, what might be some things that might be some really great areas of for example, the blog activity, right? Any research activities that the alumni office has engaged in. Those might be some great things that I'm pointing to. I think that we want to expand maybe future research in that area or collect more data on the effectiveness of that particular practice. Um, and, thinking a little bit too about your recommendations, right? I think that great recommendations are, again, going back to your data, your prior conversations about data. How might you collect more data? How might you gather more data to provide a better picture of the effectiveness of the program? I think that those are going to be really important recommendations to include too. As you think about citing using APA, and by the way, the regulatory standards, I wanted just to point this out to you, they're nicely detailed in the example that I sent, and that's the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. So do reference those as part and parcel of the regulatory standards that you're discussing. But also don't be afraid to go into some of the other great resources that we've identified and read all semester long. And as I mentioned earlier, one critique that I would have of the present paper is that it doesn't, really integrate these secondary resources. And in the real world, if you really were to conduct this evaluation of a college, we would want to see some lovely connections to research. Not only the readings that you've conducted so far in this class, but also additional readings that you might find and be excited about as well. My former advisor for my program is Dr. David Wirtz, and I'm just going to David Wirtz, alumni, research. I'm just going to type that into Google, and you can read a little bit more about some of the work that David Wirtz has done about alumni support behaviors. He's got a lot of great publications that are available. His CV, of course, download references, all of his publications as well. But, there's like a lot of great research, and I'm just going to Google Scholar. So scholar.google.com, and I'm going to type in alumni giving, right? Or you could type in alumni donations or lots of things. And gosh, there's a lot of available literature out here. And like one is even football and basketball successes. Okay, that's interesting, right? David Wirtz, my former advisor, also found that that football programs where, whenever sort of colleges and universities had winning years, right, their sort of ratios of wins to losses was in the favor of the wins, they tended to get a lot more alumni donations, which is interesting. And, given that, right, a feasible recommendation, maybe not appropriate for Benchley College, but for other colleges and universities perhaps would be, have we thought about expanding the football program? Have we thought about ways to recruit better athletes for the football program? Have we thought about inviting alumni to free football games or bringing alumni back to campus to, support their teams, or giving all alumni free stickers, or letting them know about the schedule of when the football games are held, or all sorts of great things, right? I don't mean to get too off track, but I think the idea that I'm trying to convey is, adding in these references and these citations is really going to be highly, highly useful for your final paper. It's just really good academic practice in general. In Google Scholar, if you were to Google me and you were to look up some of the publications that I've had, for example, let me just show you one. And this, by the way, was not, well, maybe I'll show you another one that's been, we have one sort of, just trying to find a really good one that we might have. Okay, this one, and most of these are formatted per APA, but they're published. So, they don't look like they're an APA any longer other than their documentation style. But, a really good 20-page paper, which is about the length of the paper that you should be aiming for. So about 20 pages will do you justice, right? Will ensure that you hit on all those sections. But you're going to have probably, 20 to maybe, well, this is extensive because it's a publication, but 20 to 30 references is not outside of the norm. So spending a little bit of time and thinking outside of the box, and the box in this case being our class, I think is going to be really, really quite useful for you all as you're thinking about helping Benchley College with this evaluation. Because the deal is, if you were to really go out and evaluate the Office of Alumni Affairs, they would expect that you would introduce them to best practices, right? They would expect that. A couple of notes that I want to mention. One, with references in this particular example, references in APA, or I'm sorry, not references, interviews in APA are not actually cited in the references section. So you should, kind of take that out of your brain, right, as existing here. When you cite an interview in APA, and just to, kind of show you that resource, right, citing an interview in APA, OWL is going to pop up right away, and OWL is so great. But when it's something like an interview, it's not recoverable. Nobody can ever go and get that copy of that interview because you didn't publish it. It's not printed anywhere. So in text, it would look a little something like this, and then in your references section, it's going to look a little bit, and actually it doesn't even go in references, I'm sorry. It doesn't belong in your references page whatsoever, but you can cite it one of two ways in text. And so just sort of pretend with those interviews that you'd conducted them yourself, and that those are the transcripts of those interviews. So you could go ahead and just, cite the interviewees, but it has to look like this, and it's in text. It's never in the references page, which was kind of my point. I've got a couple of other videos that I've shared with the class that have highlighted for you how to cite things in your references page and in text as well. So please, revisit those videos for citing using APA. And, it's sort of not just because I'm a stickler on APA, but really I'm teaching you this skill that you will definitely utilize, not only in the remainder of your master's program, but also if you are thinking about a PhD program down the road, which I would really encourage you to consider. And APA is just the documentation style for higher education. So as you're thinking about future academic opportunities or even publication opportunities, APA is definitely going to be your documentation style. And I'm recommending APA because it's as I've already mentioned, the documentation style for higher education. But please note, right, that it's not worth a lot of points. Although, you should really keep your writing professional, free of grammar errors, spelling errors, and focusing on, the documentation style of our profession, which is APA. So that's going to be sort of embedded throughout. If you have any questions, please let me know. Again, I apologize for what I noticed from last semester, which was straight up missing data. We didn't have any data in that class. And I brought that up to our dean, and right, my first response when I brought it up to my mid-level supervisor was, I think everything is fine. And I said, no, I don't think it's okay. And so I brought it up to the dean, and the dean said, yeah, you're missing your data table. But then we have our data table, and we're realizing it's not sufficient. And so I am working with the dean, because I'm teaching this class next semester, to actually incorporate some better data. So if you like, you're welcome to make up a set of data if you'd like to explore and have fun. But for the most part, most things you're able to accomplish, in this rubric from the little data that we have. And if you want to make something up because you'd like to explore data or just have some results that you think might be interesting, you're welcome to do that. Not that I would ever recommend that for publication or anything, but for this class assignment, if you want to explore your creative side and, make up a set of data, I actually do have a comprehensive set of data that I created for my class last semester. If anybody is super duper interested, it's like 1,000 cases, and it's right on the screen right now, in which I've um, done a lot of extensive work on sort of making up things like how much does that person make and what's their occupation, and did they attend a baseball game or have dinner at the Commons, or how much have they contributed in total, what was their academic major, what's their age, this whole thing, right? So I have quite a bit here. If you want some data to play with, I'd be happy to send it to you, but not a requirement. I think what you're able to submit using these guidelines here will be just fine with me. No need to go above and beyond. Okay, I will let you go. Thanks so much for listening to my overview of the paper. Again, APA headers are going to be really important. Double-spaced, as you can see, Times New Roman font is essential. There's sort of no extra spacing. It's really helpful that all of these headers follow along with the rubric, right? So you should have a section titled Organizational Success, and you should have one titled recommendations, indicators, and another one for improvement. And then, keep it sort of within this framework. And that also makes it easier for me as a reader to sort of easily pinpoint when it is that you are completing an element of the rubric. I will also email out the APA videos one last time as well if you are thinking that you might be struggling with your APA. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Best of luck and enjoy your project. Thank you so much.